Hello, Zuko here, and it is time for my June wrap-up of all of the things that I've read in June. I think I've read about 20 books this month. And I'm currently reading Vasa in the Night by... who's this by? By Sarah Porter. I'm only like 30 pages in, so this will not be in the wrap-up, but know that this is what I'm reading right now, so you'll see it in next month's wrap-up if you care. To start off the month, or I guess finish off last month, I read books 2 and 3 of the I Am Number 4 series by Pittacus Lore. This is The Rise of 9 and The Power of 6. I think this one is the second one, this one's the third. I don't even remember what these are about, because like they're so meh. You follow John, I think is the main character, and I think Sarah, his girlfriend, is maybe in these, and his friend Sam. I think it's Sam. I don't know. These are pretty forgettable. So, I don't think I'm continuing on with the series because the library I go to has numbers 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. So it's missing 4 and 7. And I don't care enough to like buy the audiobooks, and I don't want to physically read them because I am unhauling them. If you watched my unhaul, they're in there. So there's these. These are the first things I read. Next, I read Dreadknot by April Daniels. This is an Own Voices story about a transgender girl who one day is there when a very well-known superhero called Dreadknot dies, and he passes on his powers to her, and that changes her body from the one that she's grown up with to the body she wants. And along with changing her appearance, it gives her all these really cool superpowers, but there is, of course, drama that comes along with a, I think, 14-year-old being given main superhero powers. This is a really fun book. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it, and I think it's going to be a trilogy, but only the second book is out. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I will be continuing this eventually. Next, I read Shade's Children by Garth. I gave this a 2 out of 5 star. This is like a dystopian that follows some kids who at one point in this world, everyone I think over the age of 14 gets turned into monsters. So everyone else is like just trying to live. I don't know. I didn't really pay attention when I was listening to the audiobook because it wasn't my kind of dystopian. I don't like high technology kind of dystopians. So this book really wasn't for me and I didn't love it. Then I read The Dark Side of the Forest by Holly Black. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars because I loved it. This is about a town that is very connected with the Fae, and for as long as anyone can remember, there has been a boy with horns asleep in a glass coffin in the woods. And nobody knows why or what he's doing there. And there's this set of twins who ends up part of this mystery. And this was just a really fun, Fae kind of book that was exactly what I wanted. So I gave this 5 out of 5 stars and I loved it. Then I read Rotten Ruin by Jonathan Mayberry. This is a first in a series, but I don't plan on continuing it. This book had like a really interesting take on like a zombie dystopian at first, where everyone had already kind of rebuilt and figured their shit out and they weren't going to like make it so generic. And then it just became every other dystopian book I've read, and it got really boring and predictable because I've read it before. I've read those scenes before. I've read that conflict before. It just became really generic, so I gave it 2 and 5 stars. Didn't love it, not continuing on with the series. Then I read We Were Liars by E. Lockhart. This is a book that is better to not know anything when you're going into it. So I don't want to tell you what it's about to avoid spoilers. I also gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was good. There are a lot of like twists and turns and interesting bits to the story, and though I found some of it predictable because they were similar twists and turns to other books I've read recently, it didn't matter. I thought this book was well written, well thought out, and I really enjoyed reading it. Then I read Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator by Roald Dahl. This is a bind-up of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator. I didn't love the sequel. It felt like it was really lacking in all of the magic of the Chocolate Factory, and it just wasn't as fun for me. I liked the first book because I thought the Chocolate Factory was really cool. So I gave this a 2 out of 5 stars. Next, I don't have the physical copy of this, but I read Swing by Kwame Alexander. This is a book set in a town where there seem to be American flags popping up everywhere. Nobody's sure if this is like some kind of like racist thing or what. And I can't really tell you more than that, but I gave this book like 2.5 out of 5 stars. It felt like it had a lot of plot threads, and someone just took scissors and like cut them all, and nothing was resolved. There were so many ways it could have gone that made sense and like seemed foreshadowed, and it just went none of those ways. I didn't really love it. I wish it was done better, because it was an interesting premise that I just didn't like in the end, because it fell really flat for me. Then, I also don't have the physical copy of this, but I read My Life as an Ice Cream Sandwich by E.B. Zaboy. I gave this book a 2 out of 5 stars. This book was not good. It follows a main character who is like 12 but acts 6, and she's really obsessed with space. She's an astronaut. In her head she's constantly like, oh my god, I'm fighting the bad guys, here are my bracers, pew pew, I'm Wonder Woman. But like, she's way too old for this. Everyone around her is like, this is weird, what are you doing? And it would make sense if it was trying to like make her like developmentally disabled, or if she was on the autism spectrum or something, but that was never put in the book. It was just her being annoying, her parents all being like, why is she annoying? But like, it was never addressed as more than that, so it was just kind of annoying. I don't know who this book was written for, but it wasn't written for me. I gave this 2 out of 5 stars. Next, I read The Marrow Thieves by Sheryl Moline. I think that's how you say their name. This is a really interesting book. It's a dystopian set in a world where people have forgotten how to dream, and the only people who know how to dream are indigenous people. So people, white people, are capturing them and killing them to steal their bone marrow so that they can dream again. I thought this was really good commentary on the way that we, as colonizers and white people, have kind of taken this world that is not ours and destroyed it, and the way we have introduced residential schools and all of these things to try to destroy indigenous cultures. And I really enjoyed reading this book. I gave it a solid 4 to 5 star rating, and if you can find it, I think you should read it, because I think it's important to be reading. Next, I read The Fascinators by Andrew Innopolis. This is a book set in the American South, where it is very conservative and Christian, and a group of kids who do magic, because everyone in this world can do magic, but it is still frowned upon by more conservative places. So this is a group of kids who insist on having a magic club at school. That's always been them, and it was just super cool. Okay, I really love this book. I think you should pick it up. The main character is queer. It is own voices. Andrew Innopolis is a queer man. This book was really good. I recommend it to everybody. I gave this a 4 to 5 stars. Then I read Come Tumbling Down by Shawn and Maguire. This is the 5th book in the Wayward Children series, and I can't really tell you too much about this without spoiling things for the first 2 books at least, so I won't, but I will tell you that I really love this series, and I gave this book 4 to 5 stars. Then I read Monument 14 by Emmy Laybourne. This was a monumental failure at a good book. This is a dystopian where there is a volcanic eruption that ends up causing a bunch of other natural disasters like earthquakes and harsh weathers and tsunamis and stuff, and these kids on their way to school all get trapped in I think it's called a Greenway or something. It's just a big Walmart essentially. So this whole book takes place in a department store where nothing happens. That's it. That's this book. I mean, I don't... Spoilers, if you really care about this book, I guess. But at the end of the book, most of the kids leave. But this whole book, everything happens in the first 20 pages, and then it's like, oh, here's nothing until the last 30 pages. This is like a 300-page book. I gave this book 2 out of 5 stars, and even that was me being generous. I will not be continuing on with this series. Then I read Chaotic Good by Whitney Gardner. This book follows a set of twins. One is a boy and a writer, and one is a girl, and she is really into cosplay. She wants to go to a comic store to get a comic book so she can get reference for a costume she's making, and she gets really, like, patronizing, shitty comments from a guy who works there, which I can relate to. I've had those comments, too, at nerdy places, because men like to believe that women aren't real nerds, and they're just doing it to, like, get men's attention. So she decides to go to the comic store next time dressed as a boy, and she originally plans to then surprise everyone and go, ta-da, I am actually a girl, you treated a girl like a person, but she ends up in over her head and joining a D&D group with her twin brother with these boys and has to keep pretending that she is a boy. I liked this book. I thought it was really fun. It felt pretty realistic, honestly, as someone who's very femme, who has had those comments from men, and it's not it's not fun. So I totally get her perspective on this, and I love D&D, so I thought that this was great. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars, which sounds really low, but I promise it's a good book. You should read it. Next, I read Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. This book took me so long to read, and I was just listening to the audiobook. It was 34 hours long. I think the third book is a 48-hour audiobook. Some say the man recording it is still in the booth today. Like, that's 2 full-ass days. Imagine how many days it actually took him to record that. Like, jeez. Anyway, I enjoyed this book. I have not seen the show. I have no, like, context for most things. I've heard spoilers. Like, I don't care about spoilers. This was, like, more interesting than I expected it to be. I thought I was going to hate it and DNF it, and I enjoyed it. It was a lot. Like, it's so many characters and so much is happening, and not all of it's that interesting. But I did enjoy it, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I think I'll be continuing on with the series, but probably not until, at the very least, later in the year. It feels more like a winter read, where the days are very long and blah, and you need something to fill them, rather than a summer read, where everything is more like fast-paced, go and go, and there's lots to do. I don't have time to read a 48-hour audiobook. Then I read The Blackthorn Key by Kevin Sands. This is a, like, middle-grade adventure book following a orphan who is apprenticing to be an alchemist, but in this town, alchemists seem to start being killed, and nobody knows why, and then his master is killed, and that kind of sets off the adventure. I thought this was a super fun book. I don't think I'll be continuing on with the series, but it does work well as a standalone, so if you want a fun middle grade adventure, I suggest reading this. I gave this like a 3 out of 5 stars, but I did think it was good. Then I read Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Inge. This is a, I would say, like, hard to describe and summarize without spoiling it book, but it is essentially about a family who is very perfect and proper and does everything right, and the mom rents out her extra apartment to a woman and her daughter, and all of the things that happen is those lives kind of intertwine, if that makes any sense. I thought this book was super enjoyable, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, even though it is very hard to summarize. I promise that it was actually a pretty good read if you haven't read it already. And I read Nicholas St. North and The Battle of the Nightmare King by William Joyce and Lauren Gringer, I think. This is the first book in the series that Rise of the Guardians. I wanted to say, like, Guardians of Ga'Hoole, but I think that's the Owl movie. A lot of Guardian movies came out at one point. But this is the first book in the series that started that, starring the man who later becomes Santa Claus. I was expecting to hate this. I was expecting to hate this and get rid of the series, and I think I like it. I think I'm going to continue on with the series. I gave this like a 3 out of 5 stars. It's a really fast read. It took me like 2 hours. So I think I should continue on with the series because I own most of them, except I don't own the 4th book. I have the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 5th. So I'll need to buy the 4th. But then I will have read the whole series. And I'm debating on whether or not I want to keep it because honestly, it's very like charming. Oh my goodness, this is gonna... Oh god, don't fall in sad pug. No. Hey. Ah! 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 Cool. Then I read In the After by Dimitri Lunetta. This is a survival apocalypse story that is also very generic, where it's like, is the real threat the monsters, or is it the other people who have survived? I've read this book 15 other times at this point. It was very predictable. It's a duology, but I'm not going to read it because I don't care. Enough was answered at the end of this that I'm like, cool, I'm satisfied. This was boring. And I gave this a solid 2 out of 5 stars. If you know any like zombie apocalypse dystopian stories, you know what this book is about. You don't need to read it. Then I read Furthermore by Tahara Mafi. This is a book about a girl who is born without color in a world where color is everything. And 3 years before the story takes place, her father has disappeared. So she decides to travel on an adventure to try to find her father. That's a very like basic summary of this book, but that's all I can really give you without like spoiling things. I really enjoyed this book. It was a very cute middle grade like adventure. I love adventures. Also this cover is beautiful. So yeah, I really enjoyed this book. I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars because it was really charming and I loved it. Lastly, I read City of Ghosts by Victoria Schwab. This is, I think, a trilogy, a middle grade trilogy. It is about a girl who at one point died but was saved by a ghost, so her and the ghost are connected and she can see into the spirit world. And her family writes books about ghosts without knowing that she can see ghosts. This was a super cute little book. I'm not sure if I will keep reading the series or not, because my library only had the first one and I'm not sure I'm interested in buying the other two, but I enjoyed this book. I thought it was super fun, and it was like a fast read, and it was cute. I gave this one a 3 to 5 stars as well. I also DNF'd 2 books this month. The first one is News from the Dead by Mary Hooper. This is a historical fiction novel based on a true story about a woman who is hanged because she had a miscarriage and that was considered murder. So, yay for history and how they treat women. And I didn't get much farther than that because I don't love historical fiction, and this book felt like it was taking 8 years to read. I didn't love it, so I DNF'd it. And then I tried to read Welcome to Bordertown, News Stories and Poems of the Borderlands, edited by Holly Black and Ellen Kushner, introduction by Terry Windling. It's written by a lot of people. It is a bind-up of stories based on Bordertown. It's a like really urban fantasy place based on a town that is on the border between the human world and the Fae world, so it's where people kind of intermingle. I just don't like anthologies. I want to, I keep trying, but I just don't. So I DNF'd this after the first story was so long and it was so uninteresting to me that it was time to just not keep going because I didn't care. And yeah, that is everything that I read in June. I hope you'll enjoy it. I don't feel like taking a thumbnail picture because I don't want to hold all those books up. That's so many. All the thumbnail pictures look the same. But yeah, that's everything I read in June. I hope you'll enjoy it, and I will see you whenever I do my next video.